Back in Coach's Corner. This is a series now. You know what I mean? As soon as we got a couple, it's a series.
That's all right.
With Mike Robertson. And in this episode, what we're going to talk about is the squat and assessing the squat, and really kind of going over, like what type of squat should you do, some coaching cues, because the reality is like, if you're doing it, let's just call it the, your form is going to, your body and your anatomy, your form is going to dictate what are probably the best options for your squat.
Yes, of course.
And there's many people that kind of, I would say, force feed certain variations, and it doesn't make anything better. So if your goal is building muscle, getting stronger in the squat, improving performance, you want to be able to pick the right options. So let's riff on this a little bit, because when is something a no-no? What are we looking for when it comes to squatting and deciding what we're going to choose and pick and choose?
Big things for me are, like you said, if it looks like somebody's forcing themselves to get down, generally not going to be great. So when I'm assessing somebody on the squat, I'm taking a lot of time. I'm moving around, right? So if I'm looking at somebody from the side and I start to see this crazy arch through their lower back, or they dump their whole pelvis
forward. So I'm going down, and bam, right there. I'm dumping a whole bunch.
Not loving that.
Not
loving that. And sometimes that'll be a back issue, right? Sometimes they're like, oh, my back feels fine, but I get a pinch in the front of my hip, or it hurts my knee. So I'm always starting my squat assessment and overview from the side, and those are the big things first. Now, if those kind of boxes are checked, I'm gonna come around to the front, and I'm looking at what is their stance width like? Can they keep their foot, their knee, and a hip in a straight line? Are they doing something crazy where they like shove their knees really far out and they're like basically ready to sprain their ankle?
So
when they go
this
down.
might look like I'm going to pretend I got a bar on my back, right?
I love it.
But even if I'm just coming down, and right now I already don't feel the inside of my foot, right?
Yes.
Like I'm just rolling to the outside, trying to get space.
Just trying to basically create a space to sit down that you don't really have.
No, if you see, one of the things, if you're looking, and again, if you're doing this yourself, you could probably record yourself. And if my knees are driving not in alignment with like basically my kind of just with my toes, let's just call it that, right? But they're kind of driving outside my foot. Is that a no bueno thing? It's like,
it's probably not going to feel good,
Yeah.
right? And even if it doesn't hurt unloaded, when you're just checking yourself or assessing yourself, you start loading that, it's probably not going to feel good.
Especially not over time.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you can do a lot of things for a short period and get away with it, but you load that pattern time and time again over weeks or months or years, probably going to have some negative repercussions for sure.
So we want to make sure, like, no matter what we're doing, one of the things that we're looking for is alignment of foot, knee, hip.
Yes.
Right, and if that's out of whack, that's going to be an issue.
That's going to be a problem.
Okay.
The other thing I'm going to look at too is if there's just anything crazy extreme about how you're doing it, right? So when we looked side view, you had that crazy arch, pelvis is dumped forward. That's not great. The other thing you'll see too with people that have very stiff or immobile hips, they're like super wide, right? This is not a sumo deadlift, right? It's a squat. So if they have to do something extreme with their foot stance, I just call this toe flare, right? If they have to like turn their toes out 45 degrees to try and change levels, those are all things that I'm in the back of my mind thinking, I don't love that, and it's something I want to fix before we start loading that pattern.
Okay. One thing about that is, because I do want to bring this up, if somebody has, everybody's got a different hip anatomy.
Yeah, sure.
Is that something that is going to affect that? Meaning some people may have like retroverted hips, meaning they're kind of turned out, and that may be a natural stance. Is that something that could happen? That can happen?
I mean, so what you're going to see, and I don't even think so much in like the anteverted, retroverted, our guy Bill Hartman talks a lot about ISAs, right? Some people are they're built to squat better than others.
Yes.
So you have those narrow ISAs, right? They can sit straight down, like toes forward, camp out in the bottom of the squat, eat a meal, tell a joke. Like some people are just built to squat better than others, right? Versus myself, man, I got to use every trick in the book, right? I got to toe out a little bit wider stance, heel elevation, anterior load. Like some people are by design and by default better squatters than others. And that's okay, right? It's not like it makes you a bad human being, but you got to know, okay, what do I have to do with my own anatomy to squat safely and effectively?
Okay. So from there, where do we go? Example, somebody's doing a back squat. It's like, but the back squat is either making them get very extended. So now they're going down. This is dumping under, my pelvis is dumping under. I'm either feeling it in my hip, my knees, or my low back, right? So that might be one thing. again, if like I just have to like flare here to even get any type of range of motion, what are we doing, right? Are we saying that is just not a great variation?
Yep.
And like, what are we looking for to say this is the choice of squat that we're going to take?
Yep. So first and foremost, it is never my job to tell you do this or do that, right? Unless I'm your coach, you're my client, I'm not going to tell you this is what you have to do. But what I will do is educate you on my experience. And if you get into those postures and those positions repeatedly for long periods of time with very heavy loads, there's probably going to be negative repercussions to that. Okay? So do you have a choice? Yeah, you could say, Mike, I don't care. I'm going to continue to squat because I love to back squat. Okay, great. But if you're my client and I want to try and find something I think is a little bit more safe and effective, one of the easiest fixes, the second we put a barbell on our back, right, it compresses the backside of our body, it throws us forward. The easiest fix, and we all learn this, right, sooner or later, is that, hey, if I just put the weight in front of me, you can see what it does to my center of gravity, right? The second I get something in front, it shifts my center of gravity back, it opens the backside of my body, and it gives me a better chance to sit down versus having to do this super hingy type of back squat.
Gotcha.
So that's one of the easiest fixes, and man, in a lot of cases, that's the only change you need to make. Maybe you need to make a few tweaks as far as your technical execution, but as far as just getting things in the right position and improving your setup, just going to an anterior loaded or front loaded variation can make a huge impact.
And that could even be a safety squat bar where I'm bringing the handles here,
Absolutely.
The weight's still on my back, but I'm going from here to now here, and I have a better position to, like, even that, I mean, not automatic. For me, even with body weight, if I do this, it's very difficult for me to keep that position.
Yeah.
As soon as I go here, I'm able to keep that position much better.
So if you're watching this at home, one of I think the most important things, and I was never taught this growing up, but when we compress this space back here, when those rhomboids come together or when this back arches, he has no choice. Just look at where his hips and his pelvis are pointing. He has to sit back, right? He has to sit into this curve. So just by default, getting your hands in front like you just did, Luka, right? When you reach forward, and I'll cue elbows forward, we create this space back here, and you can see now his pelvis is underneath him. He can actually sit down when he squats versus having to sit way back.
Yeah, and it automatically feels better. But now imagine with load.
Yeah, right.
So what would be some other things? We've seen a lot of the wedge situations, right? Like when to use them, like when is it appropriate to use them? And we talked about this too over the weekend, that a lot of times people will say, well, it's your ankle mobility. You said that, like, ankle mobility. Ankle mobility, while it is a factor, it's not what most people think that it's a factor when it comes to squatting. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I can tell you, I used to make this mistake, right? You see somebody and you watch them squat and there's like no motion. You're like, oh, they got an ankle mobility problem, right? So you do ankle mobility drills for like a year or two and you're like, well, why do I have to keep doing this ankle mobility drill? Why am I not fixing the problem? Because it's not an ankle mobility problem, it's a center of gravity problem. So one of the ways that I'll kind of explain how to do this, like face that way for a second, Luka. And what I want you to do, shift your weight as far to your toes as you can, right? Now, try and keep your heels down just a little bit, but show me how deep you can squat while keeping your weight more on your toes. Don't let your heels come up. I mean, you got some pretty freaky ankle mobility, but that probably is not easy for you, right?
No, this is where I get kind of stuck.
Yeah. So the second I give you these heel ramps, so let's just give you this. And I allow you to find your heels, but more importantly, I allow you to shift your center of gravity back, immediately you're gonna be able to change levels more effectively. Right? It's like, and that's not even, like if I just gave you a little weight in front, so go ahead and come up. So this is where we talk about modifiers, right? So heel elevation is a modifier to shift you back. Anterior load is another modification.
Because I can shift back some more right here.
To shift you back, I mean, right?
I can go all the way down.
Like legitimately all the way down, butt to calves, without an issue.
Yes.
Okay? So all we're doing is playing around with your center of gravity, shifting your center of gravity back, creating a space on the back side of your body, right? Again, if you're pushed forward, your only choice is to sit really far back, which now it's more of a hinge versus a squat.
Which is a squat, okay. Now listen, so if somebody wants to, because let's address certain things. Let's address, I want to build muscle.
For sure.
Right, and I want to use a squat variation.
Yep.
And what, again, this gets me more range of motion, number
Absolutely.
one. So more range of motion means more work for that muscle, which
Absolutely.
means more muscle building.
Yep.
But I think a lot of times people get stuck into the load situation. So is picking an exercise, again, maybe we have some heel elevation, we bring the load up front, which is going to be less load. You're going to front squat or safety bar squat less than you would back squat with crappy form possibly.
Yeah, sure.
But is that variation now actually going to get us more results when it comes to force production, when it comes to muscle building, than just getting stuck into like, I had 315 on my back, now I've got 185, but boy, oh boy, is like this, like.
You're targeting the right tissues.
Yes.
That's what I come down to, right? Do you want to target your lower back? I don't know, maybe. But for most of us, we're squatting because we want to build our legs, we want to build our hips, our glutes. So instead of just loading my back and crushing my spine, why not be really targeted, really focused, stay upright, right? Get that core engaged so everything's kind of stacked. And then, man, trust me, if you front squat heavy, you feel it, right?
Absolutely.
You feel quads like you've probably not felt in quite some time. So that's where it's like, hey man, I would rather choose an option that's loaded a little bit less, but really allows me to target the tissue that I'm looking for. That's way more powerful and impactful for me than just chasing load for load's sake.
And for me, there's obviously two, whether it's expansion and compression. I'm a pretty extended guy. So for me, it's going here, right? And being able to, again, shift the weight back to the heels, staying more upright. What would be for somebody that's, I would say, more compressed, what would be an option? What are we looking for, right? If somebody's watching this and going like, what would be a better option for me? I'm one example, which to be honest, a lot of people that we see are here, right? So the options that we're talking about, goblet positions, front double kettlebell rack positions, front squat, safety bar squat, a little bit of heel elevation. Even I love a belt squat because it allows me to be nice and upright, right, and still driving those knees forward and going straight down. But what would be maybe an example of somebody that's a little bit different than me, right? What would be a choice? What would you be looking for?
So there are times and places where I am chasing load, right? If you've got a young developing athlete, there are people, you know, your narrow ISAs, we joke around like they go into the bottom of a squat and they never come out, right? So for some of those people, a back squat may be a viable option, or a back squat to a box, because the last thing you want to do is have somebody bottom out in a squat and then they literally physically can't push themselves up. So we kind of watch them and we gauge, okay, this is the point where they can't control it anymore. And then we have them maybe do like some eccentric focus squats, right? Slow, controlled, owning the movement, you know, with that back squat type position, owning it, big exhale to push through the ground and come up. So this is one thing that I love about you and the way you think. There are no hard and fast rules, right? For somebody like you, I'm probably gonna choose more anterior loaded options. But for some of my young developing athletes that are trying to get bigger, faster, stronger, increase force production, a back squat by default isn't a bad exercise, it just doesn't work for everybody.
So it's always looking, I mean, you said it, but like I say, if it looks right, it probably flies right. If it doesn't look right, it doesn't fly right. And it even though, especially for, I would say, you're getting started in training or you've been training for a little bit, and what will people say? Like something doesn't look right, they say, I feel fine. Right? But it's like you feel fine for now.
Exactly.
And I'm a great example of this, right? Because I did it that way, and it's like I felt fine until I didn't. And it's like if you can train hard, but then train smart, it's a much better option. So
for sure.
Making sure, listen, like, you know, if you're watching this video and you're like, damn, okay, I feel those things, it doesn't feel that great, just know there's other options. You can make modifications if you want to drive strength, muscle building, improving performance, but feeling better. There's a bunch of other options, okay? With that said, we'll see you next time in Coach's Corner. Peace out.